किसी को नहीं देनी है तो मेक श्योर और किसी को पता ना हो ये वाली स्ट्रीम सिर्फ आप अपने पास ही रखें, अप्लाई करें, ओके करें और इस तरीके से आपको फेसबुक की स्ट्रीम की भी मिल जाएगी। आप लोगों को वीडियो पसंद आई हो, अब आपको थोड़ा इजी रहेगा कैसे स्ट्रीम की ढूंढनी है यूट्यूब पे भी और फेसबुक पे। मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में। आपका स्कल भाई अभी साइनिंग ऑफ। जय हिंद।
I believe this lecture is going to ignite that spark in Nasha, which is given by a very interesting person. Right questions we need to be asking, so that we can protect ourselves from this great derangement or our collective inability as human beings to perceive the enormity of the catastrophe that awaits us. So I congratulate the postgraduate department of English for this venture, and I wish a very enriching session to all those who are taking part in it. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I welcome Dr. Sheena George, a picture of silent courage, vibrant support, and nurturing love, the former principal and the head of English department of St. Joseph College, to felicitate the gathering.
Thank you. Am I audible? Yes.
Yes.
Beloved manager, Reverend Sister Anza Matthew, respected principal, Dr. Richalata Jikoto, head of the Department of English, Ms. Geetu Amar, members of the faculty, guests, and my very dear students. I speak today as the firstborn of Professor Ivy George Andrews. As the only child of Kunel Joseph John and Kuchikaran Vetal Shoshama, Professor Ivy had a privileged upbringing. After her schooling at St. Teresa's Vernacular, she graduated in English Language and Literature from St. Mary's College, Thrissur, where her aunt was leading a consecrated life as a nun. Post-graduation was from Vimala College, Thrissur. Soon she married the most eligible bachelor around the community, Professor Dr. George Andrews, who was then lecturer in Devgiri College, Calicut. After marriage, together, they started a career in Farooq College, Calicut, which lasted for 27 years. In 1964, long time ago, with 2 full-time roles as a mother and lecturer, Professor Ivy embarked on a life which was a lesson in that fine balancing act of home and career. With solid spiritual moorings, a strong sense of priorities, of right and wrong, of justice, she impacted many lives. Generous to a fault, she took up women's issues and boldly voiced her concerns, doing her bit to bring about a positive change in the location where she was placed. I had the opportunity or the good fortune to be her daughter and also her student for pre-degree and postgraduate course. So, Achan, my siblings Shaj, Sharin, Shiju, my husband Professor Gerald and I are grateful to the Department of English for continuing something which was started 7 years ago. And this is the first memorial lecture which is taking place with me outside, or as an insider-outsider, as I would like to call myself. I remember with gratitude the previous speakers, Dr. Dasan, Professor C.S. Jairam, Dr. Rosa Juju, Dr. P.J. Thomas, Dr. B. Hariharan, and writer N.S. Madhavan, and also Professor Kunjanam Andrews, Professor Shanta Elias, who shared memories of their sister at these earlier events. The choice of the topic adds relevance to the whole project, and the stature of the resource person and his presence at this humble initiative takes this memorial lecture to a different level altogether. So, on behalf of the family, I also like to thank the speaker for accepting this invitation. Today, when we live at a time when Corona has purged human lives and the globe, the fact that what Edward Lorenz had put forward, a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazonian jungle is capable of creating ravaging storms in the rest of the world, is quite true. And the award-winning novel of our resource person, Mr. Rajat Chowdhury, is also titled The Butterfly Effect. In addition to fiction, I know that he has made his contributions in short story and non-fiction and so on. So as this is the current topic of the time, we also remember Kerala has been affected very badly by climate change, with the droughts troubling us in 2015, 16 and 17, followed by the floods of 18 and 19. And then coming specifically to Alleppey, where there is only a 4-kilometer strip of land separating the backwaters from the ocean. And this land, which is reclaimed in mythology from the ocean, has every possibility of being the first bit to be drowned, to become one of the submerged cities of the world. So with that issue very close at home, the relevance of today's discussions are enhanced. So inviting all the participants, which I know include retired professors of the English department, alumni of our college, also a few students of Professor Ivy, students of Farouk College have also joined in, I know. Earlier speakers are also likely to be present. So wishing the department and all those who are participating all the very best, I close. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for addressing the gathering and for being with us. Thank you, ma'am. Next, I welcome Dr. Anubhama Verma, Assistant Professor of English, to introduce the speaker.
A very warm good afternoon to all the dignitaries gathered in this online meet. Without wasting much time, let me get into my task. Climate fiction is actually a dear topic as far as I am concerned, and I have been talking about Anthropocene and literary discourses to my MA student ad infinitum. And that is when I was talking to Geetu, we thought of having something to do with environment and literature. And this was a time when I was reading articles in Sunday Express, and I have been a regular follower of Rajat sir's regular articles in there. And what I have particularly noticed about his writing is that he talks about grave issues that pertain to our survival, even in such an unassuming manner, in a language that is intelligible to a layman, to a person who has absolutely no scientific background, without ever being stridently apocalyptic. He in fact talks about the apocalypse. He seems, in his articles especially, he seems to envisage a future which can be terribly different from the kind of life that we have lived so far. And that is when Gitu and I thought of inviting him over for a lecture on climate and literature. What better topic for a person who proudly labels himself as a climate activist. And as an author, he has 2 novels to his credit. Alongside a collection of short stories, he has edited anthologies, and more importantly, he has numerous writings related to environmental issues. He also holds several fellowships in several international institutions. And he has been a coordinator with the United Nations Sustainable Development Commission as a Southern coordinator. With so much of credentials for a person who is keenly interested in environmentalism and trying to address the interface between environment and literature, I couldn't think of a better person for such a prestigious event as this. Welcome, Rajat sir, to our gathering, and we are indeed glad to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I invite Mr. Rajat Chowdhury, our chief guest and resource person of today's live session, to go ahead with his lecture.
Thank you. So long introductions about me. I don't know whether I'd be able to live it up. But good afternoon. First, I would like to thank the principal, Rita Latha Dikutho, and former principal, Dr. Sheena George, professors of the English department, especially Gitu, Amar, and Anupama Verma, for helping me with the online logistics, students and staff of St. Joseph's College for Women, Aleppi. Do you call it Aleppi or Alappuzha? I don't know. We have Kolkata and Calcutta. So we have these new names and the old names. So what is the usual name you use? Do you use Alappuzha now, or you call it Aleppi? Still call it Aleppi?
Alappuzha, sir.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, students and staff of the college for inviting me to deliver this Professor Ivy George Andrews Memorial Lecture for this year. It's no small honor, and I am delighted to be here with you all today, albeit virtually. I hope and wish we won't have to repeat these words virtually for much longer, and there will be some respite coming our way soon, hopefully. Professor Ivy George Andrews, in whose name and memory this lecture has been instituted, was an eminent academician with a love for teaching and learning, and I begin by invoking her spirit of an educator so that it may guide me and you as we engage with the pressing problems of the day through our work, our lives, and through our art. More specifically, through our reading, creating, and telling of stories. So with that brief introduction, I will just tell you a bit about the structure of my presentation or lecture or whatever you want to call it. I am no academician, by the way. I am kind of self-taught and I've done several things together. I write, I do a bit of activism, I do some photography. So it's all mixed up. So my presentation will also be kind of mixed up. I have a couple of slides. So I will be showing slides in between my talk and also during my talk. I will try to sync the slides as I go. But I do have a paper that I've prepared for you, and it's kind of longish, but we hope to finish it in 1 hour, which is the allotted time. So first, a bunch of slides to introduce the topic, or rather to introduce climate change, though I'm told that your students are quite well aware about climate change, at least the basic science behind it, and then the effects of it. But still, let me just show you these a few slides. So can I just shift to the present mode, present now or whatever? I'm just clicking on this. And let me know if you cannot see the PowerPoints. Can you see my PowerPoints on your screen?
No, sir, not now.
Okay. Just let me, maybe I didn't, it should be coming now. Is it okay now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we begin with this, these 3 colored coats, yellow, red, and blue, and we will shortly know why these are differently colored. So let me read them out to you. The first one is, of course, from St. Francis of Assisi. He used to call our planet Sister Mother Earth. Many of you will be knowing that. And then is a Sanskrit sloka, which a line from a sloka which goes, Mata Bhumi Putro Aham Prithivya, which means the earth is my mother and I am her child. It's from Atharva Veda. And then from Pope Francis, he wrote this important letter, Laudato Si, about climate change, and which has influenced many believers to shift from unsustainable practices. So I picked up a line from this long letter. You will get it on the internet. It's a very beautifully written letter about climate change, about our unsustainable consumption, actually. And this line, it goes, because of us, thousands of species will no longer give glory to God by their very existence, nor convey their message to us. We have no such right. So these three, the yellow ones, are a religious framing of climate change, how religion is approaching climate change. All the great world religions have been trying to engage with climate change. They have always engaged with environment, but now they're also trying to engage with climate change. The red quote, the quote in red, is from a news item, and it goes, climate change brings strange weather, leaves reindeer starving in Sweden's Arctic. This is a different way of communicating a climate story, the news, the media way of doing it. And finally, number 3 is, as you can see on your screens, it's from a scientific journal, and the heading and the title goes, long-term responses to Arctic ungulate dynamics to changes in climatic and trophic processes. So this is the most complicated framing, is the scientific framing of climate change, but it's very, very important because we activists, we writers believe that we need the science behind us to deal with the other discourse that's being promoted, that climate change is fake, climate change is not true, the denialists are there, and all kinds of problems are there. So the scientific framing is important, but the scientific framing for a lay person is very difficult to digest, very difficult to make meaning out of. So in this first slide, we present 3 different framings, 3 different ways of putting across the climate story: the religious way, the media way, and the scientific way. And in the next slide, we have a different way of telling the climate story. And I will read the first quote, which is from Cormac McCarthy's The Road, very important novel. Everyone should read it. And this is the last paragraph of the novel, by the way. Once there were brook trout in the streams in the mountains. You could see them standing in the amber current where the white edges of their fins wimpled softly in the flow. They smelled of moss in your hand, polished and muscular and torsional. On their backs were vermiculate patterns that were maps of the world in its becoming, maps and mazes of a thing which could not be put back, not be made right again. In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery. So that is the literary way of communicating climate change, and it immediately touches you at the core of your heart. It's so much more powerful. Of course, the other framings are important, and we'll be, for the rest of our talk, for the rest of the presentation, for the rest of the paper, we'll be just talking about this literary framing of climate change, the types and the various ways of critiquing this kind of writing. What are the problems of this kind of writing? That will form the rest of my talk. So let us just move to the next slides. A bit of context. This is the title, of course, you know, Sunburnt Stories, Climate and Literature. And let me see what we have. This is the background about Kerala. You all know this, how Kerala is especially threatened by climate change, just like my state, West Bengal. We are both on the sea. We have the ocean, the Bay of Bengal, and you have the Arabian Sea. And the cyclonic activity in the Arabian Sea has been increasing. Previously, it used to be only the Bay of Bengal, but now, over the years, the cyclonic activity has been increasing. There is the risk of sea level rise. There is a huge fisher folk community population in your state. And of course, you know about the August 28 flooding. 7.71 lakh marine fisher folk in your state, 222 fishing villages, and they are all threatened by climate change, not only because of the storms, not only because of the rise in sea level, but also because the ocean is getting affected, ocean life is getting affected. There are increasing bigger and bigger areas of oceanic dead zones where there is very low oxygen level and all other kinds of problem. Ocean acidification, the migratory routes of fish are changing, and your fisher folk are very well aware that something is happening. So we are especially threatened by climate change. Your state and mine and every coastal Indian state, even the desert states, Rajasthan, different kinds of problems. So how to tell the story of all this? We can do the scientific framing, we can do the religious framing, but the literary framing, we believe, is very important. So this is a map of the oceanic dead zones. You see the blue areas around the continents. These are the areas in the oceans where the oxygen level has gone down, and this will affect the fish catch. All kinds of marine life are getting affected because of this. As the oxygen level goes more, decreases more, it will the parts of ocean will just go dead. There will be no marine life left there. So it's dangerous. And this oceanic dead zone, these low oxygen levels are linked to climate change. There are various processes involved, but climate change is also in the soup, part of it. So a very small, a little trailer just to give you a flavor of a climate movie. I don't know whether any of you have seen this. I'm sure some of you must have, but just a little trailer, just 1 or 2 minutes. And I hope you will be able to hear the sound. I'll just click here. Let me know if it doesn't work. Then we will move to the next slide. It will play directly from YouTube, so there might be an advertisement coming up in the beginning. Hopefully it will play okay. Just to give you a flavor of a climate movie. It's taking a lot of time. It shouldn't be taking so much time, but it's coming on slowly. Can you hear the sound?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, so that's a problem. That is a problem we face with Google Meet sometimes. Let me see. But let us watch the visuals only. Yeah, it's not so important, just to get a glimpse of a climate movie. Then I will talk about it. Let me just play it for you. Can you see the movie on your screens?
Yes.
Okay.
And now it's audible, I guess. Rajat sir, excuse me.
Yeah, tell me.
I think if you choose the present now option and take a Chrome tab and open this link in that tab, it can be audible. Okay. Now you're sharing your screen, right? If you can present the Chrome tab, I think it should be audible.
Okay, trying that. I think we are losing time. Maybe we can try this later because I cannot see it says stop sharing. I shouldn't be clicking on that. Change layout full screen. Actually, I cannot find the Chrome tab that we're talking about. Should we just continue with the
let me try if I can get that trailer.
Yeah.
And that case I'll share. So your presentation will have to go if I have to present. So in that case, maybe
that's fine. I will found the trailer.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, you can just play it and then I will continue.
Okay. So maybe you will have to stop. I'll do one thing. I'll post the link in the chat tab.
Okay.
It's okay, sir. Maybe you should continue. Otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's just a glimpse of a climate movie. After tomorrow, it's about ocean currents disrupting the weather in Northern Europe and America, and a father looking for his son who is trapped in New York, and the father is coming from Washington. And all of North America has gone into a deep freeze because of climate change induced processes. So that's a very well-known climate movie, and that's why I was just giving you a flavor of it. Nothing much important. So in the next slide, can you see the slides now? I hope. Are the slides coming on your screen? Okay. Yeah. So this is a photo I took of the Chilka Lake just after cyclone Titli had passed. It's about 1 and 2 years back. Just see the lake looks calm, but the lowering sky gives you an idea that something has happened here a little while back. So that's just a photograph of a cyclone that has passed through an area. And these are two representations of a cyclone, of cyclones over the years. Like to your left, you have a pamphlet written in Bengali by someone called Ishwar Chandra Sarkar. And this is about a cyclone which hit Calcutta in 1867. And if I translate the name, it comes to like something like the Ballad of the November Storm. It's a poem. It's a long poem written in the ballad style, or Panchali, we call it in Bengali. So, and to your right, you have the website Windy. All of you must have seen it, which shows progression of cyclones, wind speeds, and several other parameters. So these are two representations of a cyclone, a very well-known climate phenomenon. Cyclones are becoming more powerful, more frequent because of climate change. And these are two parallel representations of a cyclone, one from 150 years back, and this is from our present. And in the next slide, we have this guy to your right. Many of you might be able to recognize him. This is Canning, Lord Canning. He was the Viceroy and Governor General of India. And he had this crazy idea of building a port south of Calcutta. Calcutta has its own port, and there is Haldia also, but he wanted to build a port in the very little hamlet, or a very little town called Canning, after his name. And but this other guy, Henry Piddington, who was a sea captain, and he had researched cyclones, and he had actually coined the word cyclone. He repeated time and again, he tried to dissuade him from building this port of Canning, because he said that there will be storms. This is a very cyclone-prone area, and your port will be laid to ruins. It would be washed away. But Canning went ahead with his plans, and he built this Port Canning. And as predicted by Piddington, in some years, this port was laid to ruins by that ferocious storm about which the ballad had been written. And so you see this house on your screen to your left. This was a house Canning had built near that port town, and he wanted to live there. And you see how it looks today, how nature lays to ruins the ambition of man. So that's just a little bit of history about cyclones. And Henry Piddington is a very important character in cyclone when you're studying climate change also. Even in fact, if you read Amitav Ghosh, he names him again and again, Piddington. This is a little video of a cyclone that hit Bengal a few months back when the pandemic was still raging. It is still raging. And the Amphan, just a video. And this is what the cyclone did to Calcutta. See how the greenery has decreased after this. And so many trees were uprooted by the last cyclone of May. Cyclone damage in Calcutta, and more damage. This happened in Sundarbans in the same cyclone. This is the kind of damage that happened in Sundarbans, And this is how everything links together. You see the oil rig in the background, and then the cyclone, and then at the corners of this slide, you see cyclone shelters, women cooking, lines, people getting their meals from there, a ham radio station, and NDRF personnel waiting for the cyclone to hit Sundarbans. So all these things, starting from oil, you go out and you see all these effects. And it's not only oil, it's meat industry, it's cement, it's unsustainable production and consumption. Everything is harming the environment and aggravating climate change. And this is a very interesting visual video of migrant laborers returning from various parts of India to Bengal on the night when the cyclone struck. So two things happening together, two major disasters coming together, the cyclone and the epidemic, the pandemic, COVID pandemic. And we are being told more and more of these double disasters will be hitting the planet. And so we have to change our ways. Otherwise, we are in serious trouble. So that's the substantive part of the paper that we have. We have 4 sections. Why climate change? Why climate fiction is important? What are the types? What are the challenges and tensions of writing climate change? And finally, we have a bit of impact and analysis. So it will be mostly of a paper reading now, but I will be having slides in between. So first, let us go into the intro section. I think I've already covered the intro. I'll go straight into why climate fiction. Why climate fiction is important. And then I will show some more slides. Some years ago, I published a book called Hotel Calcutta, which was the story of an old hotel which had come in the crosshairs of land sharks who wanted to demolish the building and put up a shopping mall. Now a Buddhist monk arrives at this hotel to stay there for a day, and he just adores this handsome old building. And when he comes to know about the land sharks, he tells the manager there is a way the hotel can be saved. He asks them to tell stories. Every day, he says, someone has to tell a story inside this hotel. And the monk leaves the next day, but quite magically a storyteller arrives, and he tells a new story. And the day after that, another comes, and then one more. And this book is made up of these stories. As the storytelling goes on, the fortunes of the hotel begin to change, and the land sharks begin to retreat. Why am I telling you this? Must be obvious. It is to communicate the fact that stories and fiction is important. In my book, the stories seem to work like magic, but otherwise also, they are quite powerful. Storytelling from ancient times has always brought people together. By connecting with us at our deepest levels, stories can move us in ways that bare facts, scientific material, or news reports cannot. Besides serving to connect people and communicate at a deeper level, stories often serve the purpose of moral commentary, influencing our behavior, politics, and action. While the scientific method makes a purposeful dissection of reality to discover its hidden laws, the literary artist works with the human mind. The subconscious and the natural world is her material, imagination her resource, and language her tool. When Kim Stanley Robinson in Pacific Edge, a famous sci-fi novel, a famous environmental novel, imagines some characters in the small township of El Modena coming together to correct the wasteful ways of the past while fighting various impediments. He is using the power of imagination to present a possible world while also pointing out the politics and organization required to move in that direction. This is how imagination coupled with the conscientious politics can be brought together in fiction to imagine a better future. On the other hand, when Barbara Kingsolver in Flight Behavior, a very well-known climate novel, portrays how the migration habits of monarch butterflies get affected by climate change, creating upheavals in the lives of a Mexican community, while profoundly affecting the principal character De La Robia, she is again using imagination to paint a possible world, in this case, a place disrupted by climate disaster. Between them, these two authors are using fiction both to communicate the inherent dangers and contradictions of the present ways of the world, while in Robinson's case, it goes further to point out a transition to a better future. Climate fiction, including films, can in fact portray these changes and impacts of climate change on individual and collective behavior, thereby creating different future imaginaries, which deepens awareness about the possible courses the future might take and can also guide policy and action. Sophia David, in her paper Ecofiction, Bringing Climate Change into the Imagination, describes the potential critical functions of the climate novel to be that of communicating climate change, engaging readers with the issue, and making climate change meaningful and relevant to non-scientific people. These then are some of the basic reasons why CLI-FI, we call it CLI-FI, the short form of climate fiction. These then are some of the basic reasons why CLI-FI is important today. Meanwhile, let's take a look at another set of justifications proposed by Nick Admussen, which demonstrates the importance of CLI-FI in today's world. His 6 proposals for the reform of literature in the age of climate change argues that our inability to visualize the unfolding disaster of climate change arises from a problem of our culture. That is, we are not writing and telling the right stories. Calling for doing away with progress-based narratives, Admussen suggests that progress logic transforms the struggle to dismantle a destructive system into an episode of Scooby-Doo or a volume of the Hardy Boys in which the broken waste pipe is discovered dripping green goo and the story ends with its owner in handcuffs. These narratives end before the real conversation should start, the one that prevents such crimes in the first place. He goes on to point out that narratives centered on individualism are destructive, as it erases out radical dependence on each other and the environment. He points out that the self-regard and navel-gazing of culture distances it from the living systems that environment consists of, which is why our conservation efforts fail and which is where an intervention needs to be made. In a slightly different but related context, let us think of the coronavirus and how it has thrown life on this earth haywire without mainstream literary fiction hardly being awake to such an eventuality or to the intricate connections between the human and the more than human worlds which could have resulted in the spillover event triggering the pandemic. Further, he proposes that romanticizing the poor while exporting our pollution to their nations is ethically wrong, and that the voices of the underprivileged should be heard in the new fiction, narrating the ills that such a system promotes. In the final part of his proposals, Admussen emphasizes on connectedness and world building in fiction, stressing on the need to focus on systems and not objects, wherein he brings up the example of Robinson Crusoe as the latter. In the end, he stresses on the necessary connectedness between knowing, art, and ethics, or what we call moving people to action, finishing with these important lines. Writing fiction must become more than an exercise in personal fulfillment, ambition, or hunger for fame. If there is no Silent Spring without the jungle, if there is no American socialism without Star Trek, then artists have a calling and a responsibility that is much deeper and more crucial than the academy might have us believe. Amitav Ghosh in The Great Derangement, Climate Change and the Unthinkable, devotes an entire section on the issues of culture failing to engage climate change. This turning away from one of the greatest challenges facing humanity today, he calls the Great Derangement, going on to discuss why this disengagement happened while pointing out the exceptions. CLI-FI researcher Gregor Sanderson quotes French philosopher Paul Ricoeur, who writes, "The first way human beings attempt to understand and to master the manifold of the practical field is to give themselves a fictive representation of it." This then is another reason why CLI-FI is important to the world, because, as Anderson writes, it helps human beings not only to imagine how the future will look, but also to come to terms with what it will mean to live in a seriously altered climate. So we see it is of utmost importance that fiction should engage climate change. With disaster looming large on the horizon, with freak storms, droughts, hot summers, and other events becoming increasingly common, with clear indications of serious damage to the Earth's environment happening all around us, or when, as Naomi Klein says, our economy is at war with many forms of life on Earth, including human life, it is absurd that literature refuses to engage with the phenomena and even when it does, prefers to push them into the ghettos of genre writing. This attitude of ignoring an unfolding catastrophe brings an old story to mind, that of Emperor Nero, fiddling while Rome burnt. While most writers may not enjoy the status of emperors, their role in society as communicators entails them with the responsibility to be more conscious and engaged with this unprecedented crisis that humanity faces today. So that's a bit of an introduction, why Cli-Fi is important. And then we have slides, and our next section is about the typology of climate change fiction, what kinds of climate fiction there are. And here you see these are some well-known climate change works. Gun Island, Amitav Ghosh's, then Rapture. The photograph of Rapture is missing. Oh, it's here. Rapture by Liz Jensen. These are the books you can begin with reading if you are planning to read climate fiction. Flight Behavior, and then The Road, Cormac McCarthy's, and my novel, the photo is not there. And so now we move to the next section, which is about the types of climate fiction we have. Climate fiction can be divided up on various different bases. So the first one we call imaginaries. Traeger Sanderson has classified a large number of climate change novels and fiction into 5 themes, or what he calls imaginaries. These include social breakdown, judgment, conspiracy, loss of wilderness, and sphere. Snowpiercer is a sphere story, the one you have on your screen. Social breakdown consists of stories where anthropogenic climate change has led to wars or small-scale conflicts for limited resources. The judgment imaginary covers stories when nature strikes back, so to speak, and we find non-human agency in place. The conspiracy imaginary blurs the realm of politics and science, telling a story where climate change is used as a tool of manipulation. Loss of wilderness theme stories are those where nature as an entity of exceptional value is ruined or lost because of climate change. Finally, sphere stories tracing their roots to the story of Noah's Ark present alternative terraformed worlds or bubbles where people escape to from a climate change ravaged world. Anderson provides examples of books and movies for each. For example, Marcel Theroux's Far North is a story of social breakdown. Frank Schadzing's The Swarm fits with the judgment imaginary. Michael Crichton's State of Fear is a tale of conspiracy. Sean McNeill's The Ice Lovers has a loss of wilderness theme. And finally, the sphere theme is to be found in Kim Stanley Robinson's trilogy, Science in the Capital, and other books. Another way of categorization, number 2, is denial, caution, resistance. In American Literature in Transition, Schneider Meyerson identifies 3 broad themes in climate fiction novel. The first theme is denial, avoidance, and acceptance of climate change. The second, cautionary fables of the Anthropocene. And the third is ecopolitics of resistance. In the first category, he places both Flight Behavior, which is a story of acceptance, and State of Fear, which is a story of denial. In the second is The Road, among others, while in the third category is Kim Stanley Robinson's Science in the Capital trilogy. 40 Signs of Rain that you have on your screen is the first book of Science in the Capital trilogy. Then another way of categorizing climate change is on the basis of whether it's science fiction or climate fiction is whether it's science fiction or whether it's a super genre. We often hear a debate surrounding the status of Cli-Fi as science fiction. Some critics hold the view that climate fiction is indeed science fiction because of its use of a novum, a kind of novelty or newness, which in this case is caused by disaster. This is contested by various facts, one of which is the novum in case of climate fiction is behind us. It's not an extrapolation. This is also contested by the fact that we find realism, fantasy, speculation, and various other literary types in the library of Cli-Fi. As many effects of climate change are already visible, and writers like Ghosh in Gun Island draw on these real-world happenings in their Cli-Fi, it is difficult to position climate change within the house of science fiction, which needs a so-called novum. What climate change is actually doing is it is bringing under stress and even deconstructing these critical categories and genres we are so habituated with. One way to address this is to consider Cli-Fi as a kind of speculative writing, which asks the what-if question. What if things got worse? But this would still not include all stories in the genre. Better still would be to consider sci-fi as a super genre covering all kinds of stories and not a subtype of science fiction at all. That's another kind of tension. There is another way of dividing up sci-fi is on the basis of the Costanza framework. And then we go into another break with slides. If for a moment we look at the subset of science fiction which tells stories set in the future, we can divide these into 4 groups following a matrix developed by Robert Costanza in 4 visions of the century ahead. Costanza's framework suggests 4 possible visions for the future, comparing them to scenarios available in books or movies. While this matrix was not developed to study sci-fi, we can very well modify and use it here to divide climate stories primarily into 2 types: those with technological optimism, which believe that technology and science will solve climate change, and those which are techno-skeptics, which believe social cooperation, including reduced consumption and greener production, and not technology, can mitigate and reduce climate change efforts. So on the top of your slide, these 2 pictures of the lab and Snowpiercer, these are techno-optimist scenarios, and on the bottom are these techno-pessimist or scenarios which believe in social cooperation. The techno-optimist vision can either be true, that is technology like geoengineering or fusion energy really solves climate change, or they may be wrong and climate change gets worse, moving us towards dystopian scenarios and stories like Snowpiercer. Similarly, the techno-skeptic vision, wherein cooperation and other means and not technology plays a major role in reducing climate impacts, can be true, giving us scenarios like Ernst Callenbach's Ecotopia, where cooperation is successful, or they may be wrong, voluntary cooperation may not work, and we get big governments and authoritarianism to control consumption and production and fight climate change, essentially an Orwellian setting. Orwell didn't write climate fiction, but that's the kind of setting that we might get in authoritarian states trying to clamp down on climate change. This then gives us an idea about the various ways sci-fi can be categorized, the contours of climate fiction, the kinds of stories it tells, and how these stories relate to well-recognized forms of storytelling. Now we will take a look at the issues and challenges that climate change poses to the creative artists, especially the writers. So we will move on to the next section, which is about challenges of writing climate change. And then after that, we have one more section, which is about analyzing climate change. So let me begin with this quote, and this quote from Liz Jensen's climate novel, The Rapture. It beautifully encapsulates both a language and also how she connects her language with unsustainable consumption, with the idea of unsustainable consumption and how it is aggravating climate change. She is describing a storm actually. And it's the beginning of the book, and it goes like this: out at sea, beyond the grey stone bulwarks of the port, zigzags of lightning electrocuted the water, bringing poltergeist winds that sucked random objects up to whirl and dump. Passionate gusts punched at the sails of struggling boats and then headed inland, flattening corn, uprooting trees, smashing hop silos and storage barns, whisking up torn rubbish sacks that pirouetted in the sky like the ghostly spirits of retail folly. See how beautifully in the last 3 or 4 words she brings in retail folly and connects the whole thing with overconsumption. So in this section, we will look at the challenges of writing climate fiction. The main challenge is the contradiction between aesthetics and politics in writing. So the first point I have here is challenges of writing climate fiction, a brief introduction to that. You know her, Greta Thunberg, she's on your screen now. So when I decided that climate change will be a backdrop of my novel, The Butterfly Effect, I realized that the slowly unfolding pace of climate disasters will prove particularly difficult to negotiate in fiction. Unlike a nuclear explosion, climate change in its myriad manifestations progresses slowly through disparate and apparently unconnected events and developments spread across continents. While a single storm can have dramatic elements which can fit into a short story, and we have examples of movies like Into the Storm, Communicating the widely distributed development surrounding climate change as a phenomena is far more difficult. To work around this problem, I built my story on something else, a fast progressing genetically modified food disaster to guide the flow of the narrative while disparate climate events unfolding in the background reinforce the disaster. In the real world, it is quite possible that such double disasters will reinforce each other, amplifying the overall effects to unimaginable proportions. Just like I showed you that video of the cyclone and the lockdown and the pandemic-related lockdown coming together. The Fukushima nuclear disaster is a case in point. But to return to climate change fiction, I have felt that one way to make Li-Fi interesting is to twine its narrative with a fast progressing disaster though this may sometimes dilute the focus on climate catastrophes. Another strategy is to pick out one of those elements of the natural environment which can get destabilized pretty quickly and aggravate climate change. You will find examples of this in Liz Jensen's The Rapture. This is a must-read Li-Fi novel where seabed methane, the big daddy of greenhouse gases, many times more powerful than carbon dioxide, release causes runaway global warming. And in the movie The Snowpiercer, where a geoengineering effort to spray aerosols in the atmosphere to block part of the solar radiation freezes the world to an ice age. So that's the introduction to the contradictions, to the difficulties of writing climate change. And now I have 2 or 3 subsections. The first is the nature-culture partition, this is one of the most important problems of climate change writing. The British scientist and novelist C.P. Snow, in his famous The Two Cultures lecture, pointed out how the sciences and the humanities was divided from each other. Similarly, the French philosopher Bruno Latour has been calling attention to the partitioning project and the purification project of modernity, wherein nature, which consists of the natural world and is the preserve of science, is separated from the realm of culture, which includes literature. This, as Amitav Ghosh and others have mentioned, has led to the relegation of literatures which can be called nature-culture hybrids to the outhouses of genre fiction. While serious literature and high culture remain pure and untainted by nature and science, climate fiction, which because of its subject matter is a nature-culture hybrid, has sometimes suffered a similar fate. This dissuades many writers to take the perhaps professionally risky step of working in this area. So that's a problem. The second problem is with the material itself. Another problem with writing Li-Fi, which we alluded to in the beginning of this section, is the intransigence of the material itself. Anthropogenic global warming, climate change, and its manifestations are spread out over vast geographies, unfold over large time spans, affect large collectives of people, seem to involve non-human agency, and are often manifest as improbable events. The modern novel, as Ghosh discusses, is ill-suited to handle many of these. The modern novel tends to work by focusing on place and concealing continuities and period. It narrows down to the level of the individual and their moral adventure, and it ensures that narrative leaps and improbabilities are connected with fillers. These structural bottlenecks makes the modern novel ill-placed to handle the material presented by climate change, and so writers have to discover ingenious ways to engage with the subject. Thus, we find an artful handling of different time periods in Ghosh's Gun Island, which connects disparate geographies and time with the story of climate disasters. In Flight Behavior, where place is handled with all the care of a modernist novel, the connectedness of one place with another between Feathertown, Tennessee, and Little Josefina's Mexican hometown is central to the plot. This balance between place and a sense of planet is something that can make a climate novel tick. Another distinctive feature of Li-Fi, non-human agency, comes into play in Frank Shadring's Swarm, and in fact other books which can be slotted under Anderson's Judgment Imaginary mentioned earlier. Also, who can forget that scene from the movie Into the Storm? You must watch it. When the funnel of the tornado draws up storm chaser Pete to his death, in the final moments he is illuminated by a brilliant golden light, and it seems the funnel is turning him around slowly, to observe him closely before hurling him to his end. The uncanny and non-human agency are beautifully portrayed there. Liz Jensen's The Rapture, the Snowpiercer movie, and many other Cli-Fi works also handle improbable events. Finally, Cli-Fi and eco-fiction, which foregrounds large collectives of people instead of what Edmondson would label as narrative centered on individualism, are a challenge to put together, but we find writers doing this too. One example would be Kim Stanley Robinson, who has these ensemble casts in his books. A deeper problem that an author faces while telling stories about climate change is with the deficiencies of language itself. Ghosh points out with examples of Buddhist pagodas in Burma and thinking forests how images and forms could be better vehicles to convey the stories of climate change to readers. So that's another set of problems. Another is the tension between dystopia, slow decay, or utopia. This one. It is indeed difficult. So this is the third subsection, and then I have another subsection here, and then we move to the last. Dystopia, slow decay, or utopia. What to write about? That's a problem that authors face when trying to write about climate change. It is indeed difficult for many creative writers to ignore the allure of the apocalypse. Dystopia is attractive because of the possibilities of drama and also because readers like to get scared from a distance. Successful dystopian works spawn numerous inspired followers. However, many commentators, including climate activists, argue that dystopian tales, while entertaining, can push people to despair. If we agree that climate literature has a purpose beyond mere entertainment, then dystopian tales, they say, immobilize people with fear and despair, making them avoid any action to change the status quo. But despair is not always negative. Commentators like Jem Bendel, in the context of communicating the true picture of a worsening climate, has pointed out that the range of ancient wisdom traditions see a significant place for hopelessness and despair. You think of the Buddha. He saw those 4 sights and then he walked out of his home and founded a world religion. So despair is not always negative. Contemporary reflections on people's emotional and even spiritual growth as a result of their hopelessness and despair align with these ancient ideas. If we simplify this, it means fear and despair can move people to action sometimes. Elsewhere, researchers like Schneider-Meyerson have used construal level theory of social psychology to show that dystopian or not, climate fiction, by diminishing the psychological distance of climate change scenarios, leads to low-level construals, which are detailed and specific of the future, which in turn can move people to action. Another view is that people are able to filter the fear element of dystopia as speculation and will act if there is a strong message about such action. A related problem with apocalyptic depiction and dystopia is that it still remains far from reality. Although individual storms can have their apocalyptic moments, overall, the progress of climate change is over longer periods of time. It's sometimes called slow violence. This makes apocalyptic depictions difficult unless, as we mentioned at the beginning, we bring some scientifically plausible, accidental and fast-moving, fast-evolving imaginary situation into the picture. So that's another tension in the writing of climate change. And the final one is between aesthetics, politics, and entertainment. Finally, and what is perhaps of crucial importance for the literatures of climate change, is the balance between the political and the aesthetic. If we subscribe to the view that one of the responsibilities of Cli-Fi is political, then these books should influence action. Then the question arises, is it possible to communicate political messages without sacrificing aesthetic value? Sophia David deals with this question in detail by contrasting the views of George Lukács and Theodor Adorno. Lukács, she says, gives importance to art as a driver of political resistance, but he holds that politics can be emitted from the work, not because the author desired so, but because of the work's subtle mirroring of society. If you write about society, politics will come out of your work, but you won't be doing it consciously. Adorno, on the other hand, held that the art born of political intention fails as an artwork. This would imply that climate fiction which stresses on political engagement will fail aesthetically. In my own reading of climate novels, I have often felt Adorno's thoughts validated in that some of these books which were overtly conscious of its politics didn't work for me aesthetically and didn't provide the joys of reading. But clear political intention is one thing, and for a book to emit its politics, as Lukács says, are slightly different, basically keeping the field open for experimentation, which is what is happening in climate literature. If we look back at Asmussen's 6 proposals, clearly his stress is on politically engaged climate fiction. But the challenge is how to write such a book while retaining aesthetic and some entertainment value. You see on your screens, there is an entertaining novel to your right, Rapture, and then a very aesthetically pleasing novel, The Road, and in the middle is a politically engaged novel, 40 Signs of Rain. So there's one more subsection here, which is the tension between climate fiction and post-colonial fiction. Earlier, we had wondered about the paucity of sci-fi produced in India. Just a few books, a couple of movies like Karvi Hawa, and we are done. Because of different geographies and socio-economic conditions, many post-colonial nations experience climate change differently from much of the advanced industrialized nations. Also, the post-colonial lens of power, economics, politics, religion, and culture, and how these elements work in relation to colonial hegemony, tends to resolve an issue like climate change differently than a Western ecological approach. Then again, low levels of awareness about the seriousness of climate change, coupled with the aggressive selling of the growth dream, high economic aspiration levels, and high consumption lifestyles of a large section, seems to have militated against the creation and consumption of sci-fi in a country like India. Post-colonial writing and criticism attempts to expose colonial and neo-colonial systems and networks of power embedded in the existing order and social systems. Sophia David, quoting Rob Nixon, has summarized the 4 major differences between post-colonial writing and eco-critics. While post-colonialists focus on hybridity and cross-culturation, eco-critics have engaged more with purity and the discourses surrounding it. Virgin wilderness and the preservation of uncorrupted last green places. That's what eco-criticism is about. Also, post-colonial texts often talk about displacement, while the ecological approach has been to give primacy to place. Then again, post-colonial studies have shown a marked interest in the cosmopolitan and the transnational, while much of environmental literature has had a national setting, usually an American setting. Finally, while post-colonial writing and studies have tended to dig out and reimagine forgotten marginalized pasts, eco-critical work and fiction have valorized timeless moments which seem to stand outside history. But all this is in a flux. With the worsening climate situation, eco-fiction and criticism developing a sense of planet alongside a sense of place, and post-colonial texts engaging globalization, which, via carbon dioxide emissions and export of dirty industries, casts its ominous shadow on the planet. So it's changing now. The two kinds of criticism are coming together, coming closer. Jeffrey Barber points out that as eco-critical theorists become more transnational and post-colonial theorists confront environmental impacts and imperatives among other political issues, they can both meet around the concept of justice, environmental justice or climate justice. So that's about the tensions of writing climate fiction. And the final section we have now is about impact, how to read climate fiction. What is the impact of climate fiction? So we have 3 subsections here. You have the UN Sustainable Development Goals on your screen. Earlier, we had discussed the political and aesthetic values of climate fiction and their inherent contradictions. Let us now focus a bit more on the political and attempt to examine the variety and desirability of messages, the means by which these are conveyed to the reader of climate fiction, and look at some of the effects that climate fiction has on the reading public. As we are talking about climate, we will look principally for engagement with sustainability and associated views. So the first way of reading, approaching, criticizing, critiquing, analyzing climate fiction is through a production and consumption flows approach. There are these internationally agreed definitions and goals of sustainability enshrined in the 17 Global Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, called the SDGs. Goal 13 asks countries to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts by regulating emissions and promoting developments in renewable energy. Many other SDGs like number 12, responsible consumption and production, number 11, sustainable cities, number 7, affordable and clean energy, among others, have linkages with the climate goal of the SDGs. Barber has used both the production consumption flows approach and Ken Wilber's integral theory alongside the SDGs in an interesting study to analyze how sci-fi movie trailers convey sustainability concepts. In the production consumption flows approach, he examines how a particular sci-fi movie trailer, say Day After Tomorrow, frames climate impacts by defining the problem, identifying its roots, and discussing possible solutions, strategies, and policies. This approach can be equally applied to books and full-length movies. So he's looking there in these texts, in these movies, to its engagement with sustainable development goals, to unsustainable, whether it's talking about unsustainable production and consumption, and the ways out of it. Another way of approaching, analyzing, or critiquing climate fiction is through the integral ecology approach, again by Barber. Barber has developed it. Barber again employs an integral theory approach which uses integral ecology. Analyzing movie trailers on the basis of SDGs they address and the effect they have on individual and collective domains, both internally and externally. It is interesting to note that integral ecology is mentioned time and again in the Pope's Laudato Si about climate change, which we quoted earlier. Here he is looking basically about change in our worldviews, change in human psychology and how it's affecting society, whether it's moving us away from sustainable production and consumption, and whether the story that he is reading or the movie that he is watching, he or she is watching, whether they bring up these topics of change in mindsets, change in psychological behavior, change in behavior. And finally, we have the empirical eco-critical approach of studying climate fiction. And here, most of the work has been done by Schneider-Meyerson. This slide was about the integral ecology approach, how it changes mindset and whether it can have an impact on our voting behavior also. So this is the third one, empirical eco-criticism. Another way to gauge the influence, this is very important for critics and literature students, the last one. Another way to gauge the influence of CLIFI on environmental belief and behavior is the empirical eco-critical method of reader surveys, which generates qualitative and quantitative data. Schneider-Meyerson has used the reader response theory approach with data about 19 CLIFI works from 161 American respondent readers to investigate who its readers are and what they make of their reading experiences. This study found that readers of climate fiction were younger, more liberal, and more concerned about climate change than those who didn't read this genre. Also, there was a large percentage of millennials among CLIFI readers. While these books did not help to shape the views of all readers, nevertheless, climate fiction did not just help some readers, this is a quote, nevertheless, climate fiction did not just help some readers picture potential futures, but focused their gaze on subjects that had previously been unknown. These books also evoked dramatic emotional responses in many readers, and it was found that liberals are more likely to be nudged by CLIFI, this is important, from their cautious to concerned position, or from concerned to alarmed vis-a-vis climate change. If you are cautious, you become concerned after reading CLIFI. Many readers could connect their reading with actions they took later on. In his latest 2020 study, this just came out maybe a few weeks back, where he randomly offered 3 stories, 2 CLIFI and 1 standard realist fiction, to readers. Schneider-Meyerson found an overall increase in concern about climate change among readers who read the CLIFI stories instead of the standard realistic story. This new study also discovered, and this is important, the importance of repeated readings of CLIFI and how otherwise the effects wash off. So you have to read more and more CLIFI novels. And please read my novel also. From what is already known about other genres for CLIFI too, the study found identification, that is, connection to character, and transportation, that is immersion in the narrative, are both important in driving the persuasive effects of the stories. They also found how the story world influences readers' beliefs about climate change impacts. For example, possibilities of flooding versus possibilities of drought. So this is the substantive section of the paper, and now I will just have the conclusion. I have a little conclusion written down. These are some images of climate novels. If you want to contact me, I'll send you more lists. These are a few more images. And let me read out the conclusion while we have this on your screen. These are birds chirping. The previous section makes us aware of the diversity of readership and the varying appeal and reactions to cli-fi. As we mentioned before, the genre is in itself includes a wide diversity of writing, from realist to fantasy and much in between. Also, we found that readers' political views and ideologies can have an influence on their reaction to this type of writing. We have seen throughout this discussion a tension between the aesthetic and the political in cli-fi writing, and the different ways these books can appeal to different readers. All this leaves the field wide open for experimentation and development. The growing awareness within ecological texts and post-colonial writing about the tools and concepts of each other creates the possibility of more interesting work being produced by both, and an increased convergence in areas of the critical field addressed by each. This will not only support the overall growth of cli-fi as a genre, but will also catalyze new and innovative engagements in the realm of cli-fi. The cli-fi author Liz Jensen recently asked me in an email whether I believed that eventually all fiction will be climate fiction. This is not hard to imagine with the relentless advances of the climate disaster. As the science develops and more understanding about the wicked problem of climate change is accumulated, it is expected that writers will use new and innovative plots to address the issue. In course of this, authors will also have to negotiate the challenges of writing climate fiction, which we discussed earlier, and devise newer strategies to stitch together the slow progress of climate change while keeping the reader engaged. Schneider Meyerson, writing in American Literature in Transition, mentions Paolo Bacigalupi's The Wind-Up Girl, a very important novel, as an example of a book which addresses two of the emerging trends of climate fiction, which labels imagination to the transition to life after oil, when oil is finished, and climate injustice. We have recently seen how justice issues can play an important role in bringing post-colonial and eco-critical writing together. Eco-critical writing closer, as found in Amitav Ghosh's fiction. These trends are expected to be buttressed in the climate writing from post-colonial nations. As the climate situation worsens further and the floods in Kerala and the cyclones in Bengal return ever so frequently, and the realization slowly dawns upon us that we are running out of time, a politically engaged cli-fi might need to devise new modes and forms of expression to communicate better. Perhaps vehicles like web series, short films, blogs, plays, poetry, the twining of words and pictures, or even that old and almost forgotten form of the serialized novel published on websites could make a comeback. The urgency of the situation will also require a more flexible approach to getting published, where authors focus more on putting out their material rather than waiting months and years for mainstream publishers to commission their work. Perhaps small and independent presses will be the champions of the great wave of cli-fi that will soon wash across our countries. And in all of this, good writing, which moves readers and also influences behavior, will still matter. Thank you. So that's what I wanted to read out to you. And I have, this is my book. You will find it on Amazon if you're interested. And let me see, this we have already discussed. And I have a couple of movie clips. This is an organization I'm associated with, which is studying sustainable production and consumption, bringing together practitioners. These are a number of trailers I have, and this is the final slide. You can take down my Facebook, my Instagram, my Twitter, both are at Rajat Chaudhary. if you want to, I share a lot of material on climate fiction and climate change on my Twitter. So if you're interested in those subjects, you can just tweet me or follow me or whatever. And so thank you. And if there is time, I can take questions. I can also play one or two of these trailers. There is a particularly interesting one from Fridays for Future, Greta Thunberg's organization. But I don't know, Gitu or Anupama, you can tell me whether we have time. Otherwise, I am done. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We'll try to show that trailer now of
okay.
Day After Tomorrow. Let me
okay.
see it.
Okay. Yes.
Can you see the screen?
Yes. Yes.
Is it audible?
Yes, it is.
What's gone into them? They're all worked up today.
We found something extraordinary and disturbing, that is. You recall what you said about how polar melting might disrupt the North Atlantic current?
Yes.
Well, I think it's happening.
We've hit some unusual turbulence. We've experienced a cloud layer that's abnormally high.
All right.
Please.
He's afraid of flying.
The government has to start making long-term preparations now. Jack, all you have is a theory.
It's been raining like this for 3 days now.
Mr. Vice President, if we don't act now, it's going to be too late.
I'm afraid that time has come and gone, my friend.
What can we do?
Save as many as you can.
The storm is just going to get worse.
What should we do?
I will come for you. Do you understand me?
Is that the one you wanted, sir?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And we have already discussed it. It is one of the very important sci-fi novels, sci-fi movies, which is about disruption in the oceanic currents and how it's bringing an ice age in Northern America very quickly, following some severe storms. And this father is going out to rescue the climatologist father is going out to rescue his son, who is sheltering in a library in New York. So, and there are two more very interesting slides that I have, interesting movie clips. One is the last one. Can you, Gitu, can you just, I'm just putting it up. It's Our House is on Fire, Fridays for Future. Can you see it on the screen now? Yeah, but can you get hold of the, can I just put it in the chat and can you play it from your side?
Sure.
Yeah, because this is very interesting how everything about advertising is not really bad. I wrote an article in last week's Indian Express, New Indian Express, which is about how advertising is driving unsustainable consumption, but there can be responsible advertising also. So this little clip is about that, responsible advertising. Let me just bring up the chat. Have we used up our allotted 1 hour, or do we have?
We do have time. We
have time. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just copy pasting the link.
Yes.
Yeah, it's there, and there will be just one more, which is an Indian sci-fi movie.
All right, I'll share the screen right now.
Yeah.
You have a test?
I've got to stay at the office till about 6:30 tonight.
They'll swim for
Lunch is there. Bye, sweetheart. Have a good day.
So that's a very powerful climate message. Our house is on fire and we are not just bothered about it, and it's asking us to take action. And so the last one is an Indian cli-fi movie called Karvi Hawa. I'll just paste the link here. They're very interesting, very powerful, very entertaining climate movies and climate books we have already discussed. Here is Karvi Hawa. I'll just copy it in the chat. Let me see. Yeah. If someone can just play this last clip.
I really don't think shadi is necessary.
Your husband's lack of interest in
So that is an advertisement. It always comes.
समझौते में दावा किया गया है कि अगर धरती के तापमान पर ब्रेक नहीं लगा तो बर्बाद किया जाएगी।
सबको पता है कि क्लाइमेट चेंज दुनिया के सामने एक बड़ा खतरा है।
धरती में तापमान बढ़ने लगा है।
खड़ी फसल को नुकसान हुआ। हजारों किसानों के लिए खेती से ज्यादा आसान है मौत को गले लगाना।
कोई फंदा लटक के मर रहा है, कोई जहर खा के मर रहा है। अब इन बिहार में सिर्फ उन्हीं की चीखें गूंजती हैं। तो कहाँ के हो?
ओडिशा का हूँ।
स्वर्ग है बात, हर तरफ पानी पानी, हवा की बड़ी कृपा है तुम सबों।
हाँ, कुछ ज्यादा ही है।
आज से गुजर रहा था तब मैंने देखा ये जगह बिल्कुल सूखा हुआ था और अब पूरा इलाका जो है जलमग्न हो चुका है। सबसे बुरी
हमारे क्लास में एक लड़का कह रहा हो कि साल में दो ही मौसम हुए, गर्मी और सर्दी।
बरसात को कहाँ लो?
मास्टर बरसात को साल में बस 2-4 दिन ही पड़ते।
सही कही उसने।
हमारे बुक में तो 4 मौसम लिखे हैं।
पहले होते
तो अब काहे नहीं?
चला भिखारी समझाए क्या? पूरा 2000 रुपए चाहिए, नहीं तो कोर्ट आना पड़ेगा कल।
चला जब हमारे यहाँ बच्चा जन्मता है ना, तो हाथ में तकदीर के जगह कर्जे की रकम लिख के लाते हैं।
हाँ, क्या करें, सबका अपना अपना मजबूरी है।
काम पूरा होने के बाद बोलो लेना तो ले आओ, नहीं तो जाओ।
बहुत डर लगा था कि रोग कहीं हमारे मोड़ा को भी ना खा जाए।
कौन सा रोग?
वही हवा।
अरे चाचा, आपके लिए नहीं तो मेरा परिवार के लिए कर दो चाचा। मेरा घर नहीं है, गांव नहीं है, सब समुद्र से निकल गया है। उसको ढूंढते ढूंढते मेरा बाप समुद्र के अंदर चला गया।
हमारे जमाने में 4 अलग अलग दिशा से खुशबू लेके आते हो। अब न जाने क्या हो गया उसको, जैसे बीमार हो गई हो।
मैं बंजर, 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 मैं बंजर।
Thank you. Yeah. So you see how justice issues come to the forefront when we are making post-colonial climate fiction, when we are writing or making movies in a post-colonial nation. Just look at this trailer gives you an idea that justice issues are closely intertwined with climate change and the effects of climate change. So yeah, thank you very much. And if there are questions or anything, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, sir, for this inspiring and interesting talk. And I'm sure each one of us will have a lot to take away from this talk. We are all encouraged, sir. Thank you so once again. We have a few questions that came up in the chat box, and I request Dea to read out those.
Thank you, Nehmia. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So I'll be reading out the first question. How much truth would there be to say that climate fiction is parallel to apocalyptic fiction, in the sense that cli-fi deals with how our actions wreak havoc to the environment, thus leading to its destruction, apocalyptic dealing with more or less the same?
Yeah, there is a subset of climate novels which are Can you hear me clearly? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they run parallel for a bit because there is a huge subset of climate novels which are apocalyptic. But there are other climate novels which are not. There are climate novels where people come together, as I told you in that slide of 4 visions of the century, Costanza framework and all that, where people come together to change the world, to move towards, to imagine a better future. So that those novels, those movies, those are not really apocalyptic. And if you want to read the non-apocalyptic climate fiction, a good place to start is with Kim Stanley Robinson. It shows how even after so much damage has been done, we might still save the day. So for a bit, it runs parallel, but then it also diverges. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Leah. Sir, will climate fiction be able to inspire people to have planet-saving choices over money and energy-intensive development? How far can it change our strategies for progress? Is it a call to forego all the earned developments, or one to inspire energy-less developments?
Yeah, the short answer is to inspire energy-less development. You don't have to forego everything, but we can live simpler lives. We do not need so many products. We do not need to travel at the drop of a hat. We do not need to take flights. We can travel by train, which has a smaller carbon footprint and things like that. There are several things we can do. And what climate fiction can do in changing mindsets? Well, it has a role, but every other thing also has a role. Science has a major role. We need to be backed by science. Activists have a role, and even the coming together of activism and writing is very important. And I must tell you this, there is this organized, Extinction Rebellion, which is a major worldwide movement for climate change, against climate change, for or against it means the same. So Extinction Rebellion is a group closely associated with Greta Thunberg's Fridays for Future also. Greta Thunberg often comes and speaks at Extinction Rebellion. And under Extinction Rebellion, there's this writers group called Writers Rebel. So here they bring writers on a platform and they speak about climate change. They are not only writing, they're coming out and speaking on the streets. So that is also important. Activism is important. Even Margaret Atwood and all these big writers are involved in it. Margaret Atwood sends messages to Writers Rebel. I was recently interviewed by that, but that's a different question. You can look up Writers Rebel and you will find that so many activists and writers are closely involved with it, communicating the climate message. So yes, books are important, movies are important, but also activism is important, and the backing of science is very important. And beyond that, religion is important. Religion has this power to influence people in a different way. So the Pope's letter, St. Francis, the Laudato Si', that I'm told had a very a major influence on minds of people, at least on believers, on Christians. So all of these are important, but books are important too. And as I told you at the beginning, literature connects with you at a deeper level, maybe. Religion also does. So yes, there's a whole menu on offer, and when you go about it, when you go about influencing people, you have to look what is your strength. If you feel that you're doing science and you're good at science, you can just move in that direction and tell people about the science of climate change and how it's dangerous. If you are a writer, if you can create images, movies, or you can write, you use that to communicate the message of climate change. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we have a question from Zahira Rahman. Please comment on Spivak's phrase, sustainable underdevelopment.
That's a kind of academic question. Sustainable underdevelopment is sustainable. I think, I don't know why Spivak said that. We get cornered, or we get held up in low growth trajectories without moving out of it. That could be called sustainable underdevelopment. But I don't know the context she had mentioned this. If you can give me the context, I can elaborate on it. But I think on the top of my head, I would say sustainable underdevelopment is like getting trapped in a debt burden, a country getting trapped in a debt burden and remaining in that low growth sphere without coming out of it or without moving in an environment friendly trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Anupam Pachauri. How do you balance between writing and activism?
Okay. Well, what happened is I studied economics, which is far removed from literature or activism even, or many kinds of activism. But as I went about doing economics, I found that economics is mostly about growth and development. And I began to think that this growth is damaging the planet, and what is beyond it, what lies beyond growth. And while thinking of that, I came into environmentalism, environment activism, rather. And then I also felt that activism is not enough, and I should also be writing about it in a creative way. I was writing pamphlets and papers and things like that about all sorts of things, climate change, genetically modified food. In fact, my novel Butterfly Effect has a major story of that is about genetically modified rice. So I was doing all that, but I felt that the creative framing is also important. So I went into writing stories, and from there I moved into bigger works, into novels and things like that. And now I have kind of struck a balance, though I spend more time doing writing than activism. But now these things are coming together in climate change. Climate change is such an interesting thing that it brings all these disciplines together in a very engaging whole. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have another question. Would ending a climate fiction with a blunt and grey future or ending a climate flick with a hopeful note be a better strategy at catching people's attention towards climate change and its effects?
Yeah, this is a good question, actually. Most activist kind of people, like I wear two hats. I am an activist and a writer. But most activists believe that hopeful futures work better in movies or climate fiction or novels or stories. Hopeful futures can drive people to action, while futures of despair, apocalyptic futures, in stories, apocalyptic endings, they can drive people off. They can move people, propel people towards despair and grief, and they won't do anything about changing the status quo. That's what most activists believe. But then you think of the Buddha. See, he saw those four sights, and then the dead man, the sick man, and all those things. And then he left his wife behind. That was a bad thing to do, maybe, some people say. But he founded a world religion which is based on peace, which goes into the heart of desire and how to live a balanced life in the world. So despair, grief, can even propel positive action. You never know. So I tend to believe that both are important. But if you ask me what novel you're writing now and whether it has a better future, yes, actually, I am writing a novel which has a better future. In fact, I just finished co-editing a volume of Asia Pacific short stories by by writers from all over our region, many countries, which are all stories of hopeful future. We call it solar punk future. That's a new terminology that is coming in, where solar energy is very important, where civil society is very important, where corporations are on the back foot and things like that. So yes, I am getting attracted to that kind of writing, but you cannot deny the dramatic value, the dramatic power of apocalypse, which is why most of Hollywood is still, they are still enamored by the apocalypse. They are only making apocalyptic climate movies. But as I told you, apocalypse you filter out that part and get the message of the novel. That is also possible. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I hope sir has given answers to all the questions asked. Are there any more questions? Or shall we continue? Okay, I guess we shall continue with the webinar. Thank you, sir. Thank you, students.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dea, and thank you, sir. And I'm sure all the questions were answered accordingly. Now I invite Ms. Mariam Xavier, Assistant Professor of English, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Nehemiah, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, I see you.
Good evening, one and all. Respected keynote speaker, Mr. Rajat Chowdhury, our manager, Sister Annie Matthew, our principal, Dr. Rita Leda Dikoto, former principal and HOD, Dr. Sheena George, our most valued participants, retired faculty members from other colleges, my dear colleagues and students. Ivy George Memorial Lecture has been a key event for the English department, which brings eminent academicians and opens up meaningful deliberations. This year, we were apprehensive about its execution due to the pandemic situation, but that was actually a blessing in disguise for us. We could rope in one of the eminent Indian writers, Mr. Rajat Chowdhury, for the event, which would otherwise be a distant dream for us. We are humbled by your kind gesture in accepting to give this memorial lecture. I believe we have all profited from your wealth of learning and experience. The lecture has been quite educative and illuminating. Sir, on behalf of the PG Department of English, St. Joseph's College for Women, I express our profound and most sincere gratitude for accepting our invitation and gracing this occasion. I would like to thank our respected manager, Sister Annie Matthew, for her invaluable support in all our endeavors. I also take this opportunity to thank our respected principal, Dr. Rita Leda Dikoto, who always stimulate us to do our best and for standing as a pillar of strength. Our former principal and HOD, Dr. Sheena George, has always been very keen about the progress of the department, and instituting a lecture of this stature shows her dedication and affection towards the department. We thank you, ma'am, for providing such a platform to widen our horizons. My thanks also go to all her family members, especially her father, Dr. George V. Andrews, for being part of this great event. I also express deep gratitude to the retired faculty of Josephian family and faculty members of other colleges for their support and encouragement. Our coordinators, Ms. Geetu Amar and Ms. Anupama Verma, should be appreciated for taking up this challenging task of formatting this event to meet the demands of the current situation. I also thank our dedicated technical staff of our institution for providing much needed logistic support. My heartfelt thanks to all faculty members of the college, members of the English department, and dear students for their active participation. With these warm words, we move to the end of this memorial lecture. Once again, I thank everyone for their cordial cooperation. Thank you.
With this, we have come to the end of the 2020 Ivy George Memorial Lecture. On behalf of St. Joseph College, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you all. Please do